is Tom DeWeese. Tom is with the American Policy Center, and he's been our guest many times here on the program before. He's president of the American Policy Center. Tom, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Tim. Good to be with you guys.
Thank you, Tim and Ed here. What do you think about what I just said, Tom?
Well, I totally agree.
That's why we had you on. Good answer.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, that's that's the situation. As Ed said, you put the kids in the gun-free zones, but we've got guns are protecting the president. Guns are protecting jewelry stores and banks and office buildings and everything else. Yeah. But you put your kids in a gun-free zone, and if there is an emergency, then you call 911 and wait 10 minutes till they get there.
Well, I do understand the idea behind not wanting all the kids to start packing while they're coming to school. I mean, that makes sense. I understand that, because
these are the formative years. You don't want kids who don't can't remember to take the trash out,
cowboys,
having a lethal weapon.
Having holsters on, walking to science class. I mean, you don't want that. But at the same time, to have a completely gun-free zone, to where even the administrators at the school or the principal or the whoever's responsible for security is supposed to walk around with a walkie-talkie. Yeah. I mean, those days have got to stop. We've got to have armed people on campus who are, able to protect the student body should something like what happened in Newtown, Connecticut, happen. What do you think? I want to get into some other aspects of this that you wrote about, Tom. But by the way, tell our folks what the American Policy Center is and what you guys do.
First of all, we're located just outside of D.C. in the Virginia countryside, and we've been around since about 1986. Our real mission is limited government and free enterprise and individual liberty. And the issues that we primarily work on to advance those ideas are private property rights, trying to protect people's property from government land grabs and so forth. We've been heavily involved in the past over the issues of the transformation of our education system, especially back in the 90s when we had Goals 2000, School to Work, and those programs. We did everything we could to try to stop them, and now today you're seeing the results of that in our education system. And we've worked hard to try to stop the creation of a national ID card. And we were doing pretty good up until September 11th, 2001. And all of a sudden we lost that battle in a major way. But we've been working to try to protect people's privacy rights. And
You wrote an article here about the real root of school violence. And Ed and I were talking off the air before you came on and said, what we're about to talk about with Tom's going to be controversial. I said, well, we want to shy away from that because we're really not into controversy.
We're all
here.
about
we love everybody, Tom.
Little puppies and
rainbows,
cotton
candy,
and butterflies.
Cotton candy and rainbows. So holding hands and singing Kumbaya, that's what we're about here, Tom. No, seriously, you wrote about something very interesting here that may be somewhat controversial on some people's minds, but you're a smart guy and you researched this, and I wanted you to at least share what your findings were in your article, The Real Root of School Violence.
Yeah. This is an issue I've been looking into and writing about for quite some time, and it's the issue of, first of all, the creation of ADD, ADHD as a disease on our children. And this goes back into clear back into the 60s where this was being done. Various things in the education acts that Congress passes. And what the research that we're finding shows is that there is no definitive study anywhere, scientific study, that shows that ADD, ADHD is a real disease. What we're finding is, in fact, in testimony in a 1970 congressional hearing, psychiatrists appeared and testified, And what used to be called a hyperkinetic disorder or minimal brain dysfunction, they suddenly started calling it a disease that needs diagnosing by a physician, and then that's to justify the use of drugs. And then we find that in 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act suddenly allowed for more psychologists into the education system. The number of education psychologists rose from 455 in 1969 to 16,000 in 1992, and then it goes on. The Congress passed grant programs where every child diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, the school got a grant of $400. And so today we end up with 7 million children being diagnosed this way. And what's the result? These children are being put on drugs like Ritalin, Lovix, Prozac, Zoloft, and most recently Adderall. And these things are like amphetamines. They act like cocaine on the brain. And children who once they get into college and they still have these subscriptions, are actually selling these drugs to others for a high like cocaine. And then we go into the connection to all of these shootings that have taken place. I've got a list of over 60 reports of school violence. In every single case, the student that was perpetrating it was on some sort of one of these psychiatric drugs. So, there's obviously a connection here. Children are put into a system of where they're basically zoned out in school because they have behavioral problems. And, the minute a teacher sees a child starting to act in a way that isn't totally in regulation with what they want the child to do in the classroom, they're suddenly diagnosed with ADD, and in many cases, the child is absolutely told that the parents are told that they have to put the child on one of these drugs in order to have him in the classroom. And there it goes.
Well, we talking to Tom DeWeese from the American Policy Center. Where is your article on this that you wrote?
So people can access it.
Oh, it's on my website, AmericanPolicy.org.
It's called The Real Root of School Violence. So you're saying that I thought the same thing, that you write about here. At the same time, I have to be careful about dismissing all mental disorders that children may have related.
And I'm not doing that.
I know you're not doing that.
Yeah.
But what you're speaking here is you're saying that the schools have I don't want to impugn people's character here.
Right.
Okay, I'm not wanting to do that, but you have to look at the facts as they exist. And what you're saying, Tom, is there's a financial benefit, if not an incentive, on the parts of schools to have more kids diagnosed this way with having attention deficit disorder or attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. Yep. You're saying that they benefit. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that first of all, what the psychiatry industry did was they took all of these symptoms that they call of things that didn't fit anything else. Children being, unruly in school or not paying attention, whatever, boys being boys, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And they put them all into one syndrome called ADD. And
half of America has that now.
Exactly. Yeah, and that alone should tell you something.
I know. I know. They used to. They used to not call it that. They used to call the kids acting unruly, and he either goes to detention, or he goes and gets his tail torn up by the principal, and he'll learn from that lesson.
Right.
Yeah, you follow the same path, and you see as this.
Now
was
you can't
growing,
spank them. Can you even? Yeah. And folks, I understand there are some children who have real, psychiatric maybe problems that I understand that. But I'm saying generally speaking here, I think, Tom, what we're saying is
7 million?
I think generally speaking here, what we got is they don't know how to deal with them. You can't paddle them anymore, and or you get sued hardly. So what you do is you or suspend them from whatever. So you just throw them in a name. Give them an ADD tag.
Well, your article, Tom, says 10 to 12% of all boys between the ages of 6 and 14 in the United States have been diagnosed as having ADD.
What? Read that again.
10 to 12% of all boys between the ages of 6 and 14 in the United States have been diagnosed as having ADD, and that means, Tom, according to your story, that they are on a drug.
Yes. Yeah, and again, as you're talking about not being able to discipline and so forth, you watch the parallel between no longer are we allowed to discipline them and the rise of supposedly ADD. Sometimes kids need to be disciplined. Sometimes they're screaming for discipline, and they're disgusted with you when you won't do it.
Exactly.
But the other thing is that Ritalin, which is the main drug in the past, it's been the main thing they've been giving these children, has passed $1 billion in sales, and Adderall is surpassing that. And here's a very interesting quote from a gentleman named Henry Gadsden, who is the former president of Merck Pharmaceuticals that makes Ritalin. He once said he was anxious to find ways to market his products to normal people, just like the Wrigley chewing gum people did.
Who said that?
This is Henry Gadsden, who is the former president of Merck Pharmaceutical Company. This is all about sales. It's a growth product, and when they're able to lobby Congress, which they do very vehemently, and they get Congress to pass laws and put these grant programs together where every single child that they can diagnose with one of these syndromes, one of these diseases as they call it, the school gets $400. That's a growth industry, and that's how you end up with 7 million children on that. And what happens then, once those children are diagnosed with this, they're no longer students, they're patients. And they're patients for life because their life has been set on this pattern of being on these drugs. They don't even know how to live off of them.
What do those drugs do to, I know you're not a doctor, nor do you play one on TV, but what are those drugs you just described? What are they mind altering, or what do they do to you?
Well, in most cases, they put you into a kind of a zone. I've talked to people who have either their own children or other children that were on these things where they just can't even function. They don't. They're just like they're half drugged. They're half asleep.
I'd rather have an ADD child than one that's like that.
So they're quiet, and they're not disturbing the class, but they're zombies.
They're like half asleep.
And the other thing is that particularly Ritalin, I know for this, was never tested to be given to children. It was designed for adults, and it has a different effect in adults than it has in children, in the adolescent mind. And they've done some studies, and they have found that children who were on Ritalin for an extended period of time, they found an atrophy in their brain. And you go into the Columbine situation, several of these other very well-known shooting situations. They were on these drugs, and it does affect them, in that way, and to turn violent, and to do these horrendous acts.
Talking to Tom DeWeese, DeWeese from the American Policy Center. This article we're talking about today, you can find at Tom's website,
AmericanPolicy.org.
AmericanPolicy.org, and the title of the article is that Tom wrote is called "The Real Root of School Violence." The real root of school violence. So I didn't know a lot of what you're talking about here today. Didn't know that.
Well, and one of the things that's just startling to me, Tom, in your article, it's you say so-called experts on the subject have refused to answer the simple question: is ADD/ADHD a real disease? Now, how is that possible if 7 million kids have been labeled, as you say, tamped and registered as permanent patients of the school system with this syndrome. How can it be possible when you can't find any expert to answer the question and say, yes, ADD is a real disease?
It's possible because these psychiatric